In this video, I'm going to talk about exactly what it takes to get a design patent filed in the US and Canada, including how much it costs and whether or not it's worth it. Hey there, and welcome back to the channel where I'm trying to start a brand new business from scratch based on this, a new type of pet carrier that I've invented for cats and small dogs. And since my product is a new invention, I decided to file patents for it in the US and in Canada, covering most of North America, because I wanted to make sure that my idea is protected before launching it publicly. Now, in today's video, I'm going to talk about all of the steps that it took for me to actually file that patent paperwork. I'm going to talk about how much it cost me versus how much it might cost you if you have an invention that you want to patent. And I'm also going to touch on whether or not it's actually worth it. So let's get going. Okay, for starters, what does it actually take to file patent paperwork? Well, I need to clarify here that there's a couple of different types of patents, and depending on what you've invented, what your product or your method is that you're trying to patent, there's going to be a different process. And what I'm talking about here is a design patent. So it's talking about the overall shape and look and feel of a product as opposed to its inner workings. And a design patent is perfect for a product like this, where it's actually a pretty simple product. It's just a cat carrier with a clear or a transparent lid that opens vertically. It doesn't have a lot of complicated moving parts or mechanical pieces. So what I'm trying to protect here is the idea of having a cat carrier that looks like this, in this type of shape, with this type of feel, that opens vertically and has a transparent lid. That's what the design patent covers. And for inventions with a lot of mechanical moving parts and different pieces that come together in a complex way, there are utility patents, and those are used to protect intellectual property for things where you're not just protecting the design and the shape of it, but rather you're protecting actually the way that it physically works. And in today's video, I'm mainly going to be talking about design patents because it's much simpler and because that's what I'm going through with my product. Now, I do have my patents filed in the US and in Canada. So this product you see right here behind me is called patent pending. But what did it take to get to this point? Well, for starters, about 2 years ago, I had an idea for a new type of cat carrier that I wanted to see if I could actually develop and bring to market. And over many different iterations and many different designs, I finally settled on what you see here behind me. And the reason I'm saying that is that it's actually pretty important to wait until the product is substantially complete or substantially looks like what the final version of it should look like before you file for patents. Because if it differs significantly, if you just try to patent your idea at the very beginning when you first have the idea, but before you've worked on the design and developed that idea, then you could end up filing for patents on a product that is substantially different from what the final version is going to be, and that might not actually help you or might not protect your intellectual property in the way that you might envision. But once I had landed on a design of the product that I thought was pretty close to the final version, and I had a couple of prototypes, I decided that it was time to actually file for my patent protection. And in terms of the steps that I took to actually get to patent pending, it's not actually as complicated as you might seem, at least as long as you don't try to do it yourself, but if you're working with lawyers, which is what I did. So the first thing that I had to do was actually get drawings done of my product showing every different angle. And I'll show you here a couple of these. The drawings have to be black and white line drawings that show the product, showcasing it from every different angle, above, all the sides, and showcasing very clearly what it looks like and what it does. So for example, with the lid on my product, it had to be clear that it was transparent and that you could see through it. And I think the artist did a pretty good job. And this other angle here clearly showcases that the cat carrier opens vertically as opposed to having a door in the front that opens back and forth. So these drawings are an integral component of the patent filing, but it is important to say here that you should reach out to a lawyer, whoever you're going to work with, before you have these drawings commissioned, because you need to make sure that they meet all of the specs that are required, because the patent offices in the US and in Canada have pretty exacting requirements, and if it doesn't meet those requirements, then you might have to pay for a whole new set of drawings and redo that, which would obviously be less than ideal. So I definitely recommend working with somebody that has previous experience doing drawings for design patents specifically, which is what I did. Now, one of the next things that you're going to have to do before you file for patents is to prove that you own the rights to the invention of the product or whatever it is that you're trying to patent. And so in my case, I was working with a design firm that helped me actually design this product because I don't have those skills myself. And so I needed to get some forms, some documents where they signed off the intellectual property of what they had designed for me because I paid them for those services. So they assigned the IP rights to me, and then I submit those documents to the lawyers who submit them to the patent offices to prove that I am, or my company is, the rightful owner of the IP rights to this product. And really, those are the two most important parts of what I had to do. I also had to fill out some other paperwork with some personal information, but nothing too strenuous. And really the two most important parts, from what I can tell, were getting the appropriate drawings and proving the provenance of the IP rights, proving that I actually had the right to file for this patent. After that point, the lawyers pretty much take over. They put the application together, they submit it for you, and then you get the bill afterwards. Now, before I talk about how much it cost me, how much it might cost you, and whether or not it's worth it, I do want to briefly talk about what happens when you file for patents. So let's say, for example, that you filed this paperwork on a Monday. Your lawyers submit it with the patent offices in the US and in Canada. That means that your application is on a stack of patent applications that have been filed and are pending review. And as soon as you're on top of that stack, as long as nobody else is in the stack before you with a similar type of patent application, then you are patent pending, and presuming that nobody else in the stack before you has submitted something similar, then chances are, if you've put all your paperwork together and you have the correct things, then you should be good to go. So technically, you do have protection on your invention as soon as you filed your paperwork, even if it hasn't been processed yet. And that's an important thing because you can put patent pending in your marketing materials, you can tell investors that the IP rights for the product are protected, and so on and so forth. So really, it's as soon as the paperwork is filed that you can go public, and you don't have to wait for it to be processed because that can actually take a really long time. In fact, in my personal case, I'm still waiting to confirm the actual design patents that I filed for, even though those were filed several months ago, and it could take potentially up to a year or maybe even longer. All right, now let's talk about the cost. Up front, I spent a total of $2,652.39 Canadian to file for design patents in both Canada and the US. That includes paying for the drawings, which was about $550, paying for the lawyer's time, and paying the fees that the patent offices charge to file the paperwork, which is a couple of $100. In fact, I'll show you here the invoices from my lawyers with the breakdown on what the various fees were. So in total, for the US patent, I had to pay $640 to cover government fees, so paying the US Patent Office to actually process my paperwork, and I had to pay $380 in legal fees plus some tax. And for the Canadian paperwork, it was about $535 in legal fees and $416 specifically in government fees. Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is to be transparent. I spent far less than you might spend, or the average person might spend, on actually filing patents in both Canada and the US, because I luckily have a connection that works at the law firm. And in fact, it generally costs more to do this. So depending on how much your legal bill is going to be, that's going to impact the next part of this video, which is where I talk about whether or not I think it's worth it. Because just for comparison, in Canada, the average cost of a patent varies from between 10,000 to 20,000 Canadian dollars, and in the US it ranges from 10,000 to 20,000 US dollars, although if it's a complex product it could go much higher than that. And there's obviously a major difference between, in my case, paying around $2,600 versus if I was paying the average fees. Even at the lower end of that range, I could be paying in excess of $20,000 for both the US and Canada, potentially more. That is a major difference, and it has a huge impact on whether or not it's worth it. So let's talk about that now, because in my personal case, with my fees being relatively low, only $2,600 to protect my IP on this, even though IP protection isn't necessarily that useful, because if you ever wanted to actually sue somebody, then that would be a very costly endeavor, and most people probably wouldn't end up actually doing that. But it is useful in the sense that it's good for marketing, it's good for investment, it's good for the business in general, and if it's not too expensive, I think it's worth it. And in my personal case, $2,600 for that little bit of peace of mind and being able to say that my product actually is patent pending was, I think, worth it. However, if I personally had to pay $20,000 plus for patents in North America, I don't think that I personally would have done it. I don't think it would have been worth it. That's a huge sum of money for somebody that's starting out with a small invention, trying to start a small business. Obviously, it's different if you're a massive corporation, a massive enterprise with, lawyers working on staff. You're going to try and patent every idea, and you're going to get design patents as well as utility patents because you just want maximum protection. But if you're just starting out, you're an inventor basically in a garage coming up with an idea for something, I don't think it's necessarily worth it. And you can actually have a much better ROI on that kind of money, $20,000, by spending it on something like marketing, trying to get proof of concept, trying to see if there's actually demand for the product. And I suspect in many cases, people spend thousands, tens of thousands, probably even millions of dollars on filing for patents for products that actually didn't have product market fit, that weren't actually gonna sell or be useful. And so that's a lot of money that's potentially wasted before you even know whether or not this thing is actually viable. So if you're sitting at home with an invention, you're working on something, you're cooking it up, and you're wondering whether or not you should file for patents, I think it really depends on your budget. I think it depends on the complexity of the product and whether or not you're able to get it done cost effectively. Because in a lot of cases, that type of money is probably a little bit prohibitive, and you'd be much better off spending that on other things, trying to launch the product, trying to launch a business. Anyways, that's it for today's video. Hopefully you found this useful, and I'll be back soon with updates on when I'm launching my Kickstarter campaign, because things are going to kick into a new gear very soon. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you later.